Moving on, it's been a record week for small boat crossings in the English Channel.
Yes, and we have some breaking news this morning. A small boat arrived in UK waters at 7:30 a.m. this morning as people smugglers pushed one boat with 25 migrants on board despite high winds and waves.
Now, this comes as just yesterday, some 250 migrants made the dangerous crossing, with 113 arriving in Dover just before 9 p.m. last night, which brings us to a total of 2,150 crossing this week alone and 9,350 this year. Well, let's get an update now with our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, they just keep coming.
Yes, and I think this morning it really just shows how callous and reckless the criminal people smugglers are. They do not care about the safety, frankly, of those that they're pushing out in these flimsy boats. They just want to make their money. And they push these boats out in conditions where no one was expecting any crossings today, because we've had weather that is sustained winds of over 20 miles an hour. And we've heavy swells in the middle of the channel. So these boats, clearly, they're not designed for much, and they're certainly not designed to be heading across the channel in those kind of conditions. But it made it somehow to the UK waters and was picked up by the Border Force Vessel Volunteer. Now, our producer, Chris, was down in Dover Harbour and filmed first thing this morning as the Border Force Vessel Volunteer arrived and disembarked those 25 migrants. And he was shocked to see among them was half a dozen women and some very young children who had made that journey as well. And that just goes to show you, as I say, just how reckless these individuals are, that they would put women and children on a boat in those kind of conditions. And you're right to say that we have had a record week. 2,150 is unprecedented for this time of year, arrivals in the space of just over a week now, and 9,337 is a total for the year so far, which is 43% ahead of this point last year in terms of arrivals. And it is the biggest ever number of arrivals since the migrant crisis began back in 2018 for the first 4 months of this year. So yes, the boats just keep on coming, and the people smugglers are determined to just keep pushing the limits, risking lives as they put these boats out in ever more dangerous conditions.
Us blokes hate talking about a little thinning up top, and many of us settle with that balding look, but that wasn't for me, and that's why I went to Elite Hair, the world's leading hair loss clinic, and now I've had over 4,000 new hairs added to this barnet, and very soon I'm going to be rocking some brand new flowing locks, and you can too. So how does it work? Step 1, I sent the team a set of photos of my head. Step 2, I then spoke to one of the Elite Hair staff who looked through my photo submissions and worked out a treatment plan for me. Step 3, Elite Hair then organised accommodation and the treatment. I was at their state-of-the-art treatment centre in Istanbul, and their incredibly kind staff took me through the process, and before I knew it, I was in surgery. Elite Hair and their leading medical experts have specialised in pain-free treatments using the sleep deep method, and they really mean that. I felt incredibly relaxed the whole time, and I haven't felt any pain since. Check out Elite Hair using the link in the description. When you do, Elite Hair will provide you with a free personalised hair analysis. Then you'll join over 100,000 happy patients. Hit that link and start your hair growth journey like I did today.
Mark White, our security correspondent, thank you so much for that report. And we've now got with us the former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. I think you will have heard the interview there with Mark White describing what seems to be a new tactic from the people smugglers, pushing women and children into UK waters in terrifying conditions. Do you think this is a sign of things to come?
Oh, yes. The people smugglers are just concerned with making money. They're not worried if people die, so they will stick people on these boats if they think that they're going to make money out of it. And unfortunately, today, 25 came across, and they'll see that as a big victory.
Especially considering the weather. But also we're hearing this morning that Labour are planning to use return hubs in the Balkans for rejected asylum seekers. Is this a version of the Rwanda deportation strategy being brought forward by Labour, having realised that their strategy of smashing the gangs just isn't working?
Yes, I think it probably is. I mean, we need a deterrent. This would act as a deterrent because, despite what people say, the actual number of people that get asylum is actually quite low. People get what is called humanitarian protection because they failed asylum, but we can't get rid of them because they come from the Yemen or somewhere like that. So if we're going to send those sorts of people off to the Balkans, that's going to act as a big deterrent. They're not going to pay lots and lots of money to end up in the Balkans. So that might be, I say might be, it might be a bit of a deterrent, yes.
And Kevin, do you think the French are doing enough to prevent launches? I think they prevent 2 in 5 or something like that, which is not insignificant. But is there anything more that the French border forces could do?
Yes, the French could do an awful lot more. There was talk earlier last month that they were going to actually operate up to 300 metres onto the channel, getting their feet wet to stop the boats. This doesn't seem to have happened yet, but until the French will actually get into the channel, onto the channel, we're never going to win this.
Thank you very much for coming on the programme this morning.
Anyway, things that'll get you mad could be small boat crossings in the English Channel. It was all meant to be getting stopped, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's all going on, or getting worse, because just yesterday, some 250 migrants crossed, with 113 arriving at 9 o'clock late last night.
So that gives us a weekly total, wait for it, of 2,122, 9,350 so far this year.
And that's up 43% on the number who arrived last year, despite the government's pledges, of course, that they would do something about it and smash the gangs.
Fraser Myers from Spiked Online is here. Fraser, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Somebody, somehow, somewhere has got to get a grip on this.
Well, you'd hope so. It just seems as if that, although Keir Starmer has found, some tough rhetoric on this, talking about stopping the boats, smashing the gangs, it's just not this government's priority at all. I mean, if you look at how many have come this year, 43% higher than last year. And then we still have the summer to go. The summer months are when we have even higher crossings because of the good weather. So clearly, it must be the case that many of the migrants are aware that there must be a soft touch at the end of this. People know that even if they are caught, they are not going to be sent back. People can commit terrible crimes and still not be sent back to their countries of origin.
What's happening with all the money we're giving to France?
Yeah.
Well, I think France will always say that they're doing certain things, that, they'll point to certain actions that they've taken to stop people from leaving. But at the end of the day, it's not really in France's interest to stop people, especially if they're living in a camp in Calais temporarily, to stop them from leaving there and going to the UK.
It's never going. We're paying them to
except
do
we're paying them to do it, but it's never going to be their priority.
No.
So it seems like a bit of a false. It's a bit of a false solution to think that the French could take care of this for us. I mean,
have you heard the latest story? I almost had to double check that it wasn't a joke. That the French, there was a report that the French are giving life jackets to those who haven't got life jackets, but they're now demanding them back off us.
So what?
Yeah,
when they get here.
When they get here and they discard their life jackets, the French are saying, oh, we paid for those, we want them back.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the British will have paid for those, presumably, through all the amount of money that we're giving the border force.
Why are they giving them life jackets? Why aren't they just stopping them from going?
Well, you would think so. If you're able to give someone a life jacket, you're surely in a position to detain them. I mean, obviously, if someone's already set sail, we've got to help them. We have a duty to help people in the sea. I think it's become... Someone died this week.
Yeah.
It's really shocking how normal this has become in the English Channel. We can't forget about that. So, obviously, yes, save people in distress, but if they haven't left the shore, you should really be, stopping them from leaving rather than giving them a life jacket.
It seems to be a policy of saying, well, if they're more than ankle depth out, they're out.
Exactly.
Sort of thing. Look, I mean, talking of things which are controversial, I mean, the government's got to tackle this, or the pressure is going to remain there. But there's this huge pressure when it comes to trade at the moment. The Chancellor heading off to Washington this coming week, but she's also talking about not cutting ties with China. Now, is she wanting to have her cake and eat it?
I think a little bit. I think there are many things that, Britain is already tied with China on so many critical questions. So, the British government, one of their big priorities is net zero. And that is totally dependent on China in terms of much of the technology that's being used. I think it's 70 to 80% of the components that are needed to make wind farms come from China. China has a monopoly even on just the raw materials that are needed, some of the rare earth metals. So, there's no way that this government is going to suddenly, pull up the drawbridge to Chinese trade. I mean, in some areas, we don't need to be too worried. The fact that China wants to list its fast fashion company Shein in the London Stock Exchange, that's not a security risk in particular. You might say it's bad for British firms. I think one of the questions we need to ask is, how did we get into the situation in the first place where we're dependent on China for critical technology? Why have we neglected our own industries to such an extent that, say, we relied on Huawei for so long to build our 5G networks, or, in this case, for clean energy?
But that's exactly what Trump is saying, isn't it? And it's a perfectly valid point. And he's saying, let's reindustrialise the United States, which is a perfectly valid point. But we're in the same boat, but we're not in the same position to reindustrialise.
Yeah, and at least we don't seem to have the same determination to reindustrialise. In fact, Britain is deindustrialising, unfortunately, and that needs to be reversed. We need to be making more, especially high-end goods, especially critical infrastructure in the UK rather than elsewhere, because the world is becoming the rest of the world is becoming a bit less reliable, not necessarily hostile, but you just don't know where things will, how things will change.
To be self-sufficient.
Exactly. We need to be have some sort of national resilience. That hasn't been a priority for successive governments for a very long time, unfortunately. It's just been seen that, well, if we can buy things from elsewhere, then we'll be fine. Now that the idea that we don't need to make things in our own country has been pervasive for a long time, and I think it's been proven wrong.
Whoever thought it was a great idea. OK, Fraser, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.